Right. This is You Can't Make This Shit Up. We're back again. It's Content Creation Thursday. I am your host, David Washington, and we have a new host, Joel Davis. Welcome, Joel. Say a little something to get our community familiar with you.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity, David. Um, I have lived in Osceola County since 1960. I did go back to Northern Ohio to go to school every fall and then back into Osceola for the summer until I graduated high school and then came back to go to college in Florida. So I have a pretty good knowledge of at least that part of the Central Florida area. I've been a state certified general contractor since 1979 and own an advertising business also. So I have pretty varied knowledge of different things going on. And currently I'm in the Tallahassee area off and on for at least this 60 days of part of the year.
Oh, in the middle of all the drama and excitement in Tallahassee during the legislative session, is it as exciting as they say it is? So much going on.
I'm not sure if I would call it exciting. It probably ranges more towards semi-controlled insanity.
Okay,
Um, Part of me wants to say that 60 days is not long enough to get this stuff done.
sure.
Part of me wants to say that 60 days is way too long for them to be in session for the safety of the citizens of Florida. So it's hard to tell. Depends on the day.
Well, we appreciate you joining the show today and co-hosting this with us. I'll just jump right into it. Republican Representative Ryan Chamberlin proposed eliminating property taxes in Florida, replaced by a consumption tax. The bill requires a study on alternative revenue sources and aims to alleviate homeowners' perpetual tax burden. Democrats voice concerns about potential high sales taxes, while supporters argue for fair taxation and true home ownership. The bill passed the House committee 15 to 6, sparking debates on tax fairness and property rights. Let's go. Joel, what say you? What's your position on this?
This has to fall into one of the dumbest ideas I've heard. I understand the concept. I got to believe it's a publicity stunt from the Republican Party. I've been a Republican my whole life,
Mhm.
but I've kidded my wife starting last year. It's like by the time we leave Tallahassee, we're going to be Democrats. I've heard this argument before, and to some extent, I kind of agree with it. Oh, you never own your property because if you don't pay essentially what would be rent to the government every year, they're going to come take it from you. But the alternative is just unworkable. The property taxes largely go to the cities and counties within which the property is located, and they're collected by the county tax. It's assessed by the property appraiser, collected by the tax collector, and then distributed within the cities and the counties. And they all have individual tax rates because they have different emphasis on things: parks, libraries, this, that, maybe marinas. It depends. If all that was to try to go to the state of Florida through a sales tax and then get redistributed back, it would be a nightmare. It would just, there's nothing about it workable. And like I say, I've got to believe this is a publicity stunt. I've seen Rep. Chamberlain around the Capitol. I don't really know him. My gut feeling is leadership probably gave him this bill thinking it was going to be good for him to run it. I don't think it will be with the citizens particularly.
Mhm.
Can you imagine anytime you send tax money off out of your city or county and lose control of it, if you send it to the state or Washington, you always get back less of it than what you sent. They siphon off all their little handling fees and this and that. That's the
Right.
first
Okay.
problem. And secondly, to try to figure out, you would have so many counties in the state of Florida. The argument is, oh, tourists pay a large part of that taxes. Osceola County, I think tourists pay about 41%, give or take, of the
Okay.
sales taxes. So even at that, Osceola County isn't going to contribute enough to really get back and take that over. There's only a few counties that are even close to that. The majority of them wouldn't generate hardly any tourist tax, sales tax base,
Correct.
and the other counties would be subsidizing them. Well, it would only take a few years before some lobbyist somewhere would start controlling who was getting subsidized and who was donating money, and it would just get so convoluted, and so it would just be a disaster.
That's one of my fears also. Who would control where the sales tax revenue will go to, and would it be fairly distributed among all the counties, the 67 counties here in Florida. Also, what disturbs me is the shift of the tax burden to people who likely could not afford an increase in the sales tax. You'll have the Tom Brady's with their multi-million dollar mansions with tax relief, and they can afford to consume whatever they want. But what about the theme park worker who has it hard enough to make their rent and provide for themselves and their families, and now they see the cost of purchasing their groceries or maybe their gas for their
Absolutely.
cars go
That's right.
way up. The money has to be recuperated. And then my third point, my concern is, does this play, and I guess this is a question to you, does this play into the home rule, local control issue, the preemption of the state over the counties? One more step, taking away control that cities and municipalities have to control where their tax dollars go to help their infrastructure, to address social issues, things like that. Is
That's
is
right.
is that another valid concern?
I think those are all valid points. To your last one, I guess, first, that's kind of what I was saying. These different cities and counties have different emphasis. They know what their needs are better than the state does. And they have different emphasis on where they want to spend their money, different priorities. And if you start, what happens to all these other counties that are, or these few counties that are donating sales tax dollars out of their area that goes back to the counties that aren't generating enough? Do they then get to start having say so on what the priorities are for those other counties? It is largely the dumbest idea. In a city full of dumb ideas, it is pretty much the dumbest one I've heard in a long time. Like the theme parks, they would save tons of money on real property taxes.
Right.
Are they gonna up the paychecks to all their workers who are, for the most part, poorly paid, to subsidize what their increased sales tax burden is then going to be? It just is unworkable. Um,
I
and
agree. Those tax savings, will it go back to the workers, back to the community, or would I rent, and so I will not benefit from a bill like this if it was passed into law. However, the management company that owns the property that I rent from, would they then reduce my rent here in Baldwin Park, and make it that much more affordable for many of us who live here, or at any of their properties? Is there incentive for them to do that? I doubt it.
that's right. I agree. My gut feeling is no. The theme parks or no employer is going to increase their pay checks to their employees. My gut feeling is also renters are not going to see reduced rent.
Mhm.
Now, those things are all controlled by supply and demand. Basically, everything in a capitalist economy is controlled by supply and demand. And so, as long as they can continue to rent that house without giving a rebate back on it, they're never going to give the rebate back. As long as an employer can continue to get the workers they need for the same rate of pay without upping it to offset that sales tax burden, then they're not going to increase the pay. Those are separate issues that are controlled by supply and demand, not by this part of that equation.
Mhm. Florida is one of 7 states that does not have an individual income tax. And so that is one of the attractions for people to move to Florida. If Florida does not have a property tax, would that be more of an incentive for people to come to Florida, despite the fact that if there's no property tax, the sales tax may go way up, or other consumption taxes may be levied upon Floridians?
Well, don't you think what might happen, David, is you would see more wealthy individuals coming to the state? You would probably see lower income, poorer individuals having to leave the state just because if I'm going to buy a $10 million mansion, it's going to benefit me hugely. And I'm still going to buy what I'm going to buy largely. The people that are on the lower end, even if they own their own home, they're going to have a very small savings. There's already a number of exemptions in the state real property tax law
Okay.
that the people at the bottom end of the spectrum pay little or no real property tax. And there's some areas where that's a problem for them because they don't the housing in that area may barely, I don't know nowadays because of inflation, but there used to be areas at least where real property tax didn't bring in a ton because a lot of the exemptions wiped out the tax base before it came to the taxable level. I don't know. It would be, I say I want to kind of laugh at his analysis of real property tax being akin to slavery, but it
Right.
more offends me than makes me laugh. It makes me want to ask him if he failed American history class or something.
Mhm.
No one was required, at least as far as I know, no one's required to live in a $5 million mansion. I'm not sure if the people that he's relating that to had a choice on being slaves. I'm pretty sure they didn't, but it just seems
Another
like a dumb analysis to me.
another insensitive moment by a legislator. Um,
Agreed. Agreed.
the the one thing that the positive that I did take from this news was maybe the thought, and I don't think it was addressed in this particular article by Newsweek, but the thought that maybe this particular proposal was another means of addressing the property insurance issue here in Florida. And if the tax was reduced, then maybe perhaps it would be more affordable for people to afford insuring their property, insuring their homes, so forth and so on. Am I a little bit way off on that thinking?
Well, ironically, in preparing for today's show, I was scanning different articles on it, and the Newsweek one was one that I read through quickly. I did see that. I don't particularly buy that. I'm sure that's not their reason for even
Sure.
remotely proposing this. Um, this legislature did nothing last year to help the property insurance problem in the state of Florida. They say they did. I'm not sure if they believe they did or not. They did nothing to help it. The rates are up. They're going to continue to go up. That is something that needs to be addressed. I'm being in the real estate and development business for basically my whole life. I am concerned that the property insurance costs are potentially going to cause a recession in the state of Florida. There's going to be a point where people can't afford real property insurance. They're going to go naked on that coverage. At some point, their lender is going to figure out they're not insured. They're going to either force insurance onto them, which they won't be able to afford either, or they're going to start a foreclosure proceeding, and that could just turn into a whole domino effect.
Wow. And the threat, like you said, of a recession here in Florida because of that
Right.
is daunting. That's scary because I have spoken to a number of residents here in Orange County
Mhm.
about the cost of property insurance and losing their property insurance because their insurer has just said, we're going to drop you.
Right.
And they're living without property insurance. And that is a scary thought that, your lender said is looking at you and say, wait a second, you don't have any property insurance,
That's
then, we're going to foreclose on the property.
That's right. It essentially playing some form of financial Russian roulette at that point. That because almost everybody has a mortgage, their lender is not going to let them go naked on insurance,
Correct.
and it's just going to become a problem. But talking about recessions, that brings me back to another point on this whole proposal of eliminating real property taxes. That's a relatively stable form of tax income for the governments. It
Correct.
doesn't fluctuate a ton. Now we have what's called Save Our Homes in the state of Florida, which only allows them to increase 3% a year. So that protects the homeowners from a wild fluctuation upward. And because of the way the taxes are assessed and collected, the governments don't have a huge downside risk during a recession of their tax base going down. But if you were to tie that to a consumption tax and you had some 2008 recession hit again, the tax income, the collected taxes could drop tremendously overnight. And how are they going to replace them? The demand for their roads and water and sewer services, and I know a lot of those are paid for by individual user fees like water and sewer, but still, to
Okay.
some extent, they're subsidized by real property taxes. That demand's not going to change essentially, but the income from the sales tax collections could just, it wouldn't go away, but it could just drop tremendously.
This could have catastrophic effects on our economy here in Florida.
Absolutely. And then how, like in Osceola County, there's an added sales tax. Around the state, they have the option to add sales taxes.
Sure.
But then there's an exemption for that tries to make up for that tax on, say, like automobiles. So people don't go across the county line to buy their car to avoid that increased tax burden. If you had this huge tax increase, could you imagine anyone buying a private plane, a boat, any kind of large ticket items that are subject to sales tax? They would not be going just across the county line. They'd be going across the state line, going out of state to buy these items. It would be, then they'd have to figure out, oh, we're missing this tax. Now we have to try to figure out how to tax, out of state sales from people that bring it back to Florida. It would be, it's just horribly cumbersome.
I hope that I believe there's this Office of Program Policy Analysis and Government Accountability does its due diligence and conduct the necessary research into this particular bill.
Yeah.
I believe they have a July 1st, 2025 deadline
That's my
to
understanding.
do this. However, wow, the implications, as I said before, are catastrophic. If
That's right.
this is not brought out.
And can you imagine how inflationary this is? Because if you were to ask the average citizen, how much is the sales tax on this item? Most would just say, oh, it's 5%, 6%. But that doesn't think about all the embedded taxes that it took to get that product to you. So, you've got sales tax on all the fuels for the different materials and the components coming and going to factories or warehouses or retailers. You've got sales taxes on communications devices, sales taxes on electric, sales taxes. A friend of mine who's a CPA and I have we go to dinner several times a week, is one of my best friends. We have these conversations a lot. It would be virtually impossible to figure out how much the embedded taxes cost you on any given product, because every layer along the way to get that product into your hands usually would have a large number of taxes built into it
Right.
that then get marked up by the next layer and the next layer and next layer. And then eventually it's sold to you. The true cost of actually producing a product without any of those sales taxes added into it along the way would be a small fraction of what you pay. Imagine taking that sales tax component and increasing it by, and I'm just picking a number that has no reason to it, but say it's 10% increased sales tax. Could you imagine what that would do to the final cost of the product with that 10% embedded into all the components of that at the end of the day?
It get more and more expensive, and people will find other options. Like you said, go over the state line,
That's
maybe
right.
the internet. I know there is this tax levy that Governor DeSantis championed on internet sales, but people will find a way
That's right.
to find things more affordable.
That's right. Well, and then the next thing you know, you have black markets popping up.
Mm.
Could you imagine living in a society where you go down to the corner somewhere and some guy's in the shadows and you buy your lettuce from him, or you buy a bar of soap for the shower from him, or your razor blades? I mean, it's just
Right.
it's
I may laugh at that. However, that's a possibility. That
absolutely.
is a possibility. We see that in medication, pharmaceuticals,
That's right.
and other items, cigarettes. I remember, in Chicago, on the corner, they sell cigarettes by the single cigarette instead of the pack, and
Mhm.
the black market economy. So there's some truth in that. There's
That's right.
definitely some truth in that.
And we live in, at the end of the day, one of the things that just is immutable is we live in an efficient economy. Nobody or no group of people pays a penny more than a product than they feel it's worth. Nobody sells a product for a penny less than what they feel they can get for it. That all balances out. But when you start throwing these sales tax calculations into it, it just skews that whole concept. And the next thing you know, people start trying to find a way around it.
Right, right.
We
Joel,
still have the cities and the states that have legalized marijuana because of the high taxation on it. My understanding is you still have black markets that exist in that because
that's correct.
people feel burdened by the sales tax. And so even though that product is legal, which I don't support, but irrelevant, they try to go around it.
Joel, with your proximity to the legislative session right now, do you see any legislation or discussion related to this particular bill or um, addressing property insurance that definitely has some teeth to it in support?
Um, I don't. And last year when we were up here, I was pretty involved in trying to pre-read all the bills coming up, and that led to some controversy between my wife and myself with having different points of view. This year, I've pretty much removed myself largely out of the process.
Okay.
Every once in a while, she'll ask me for an opinion on a bill. I hesitate to give it to her. But last year, they had a special section. She had just gotten elected. We come up here. I was sitting up in the gallery, and it was on property insurance. And for the most part, leadership doesn't want the state reps to read these bills. They give them to you at the last second. And she's always asking, how do they expect us to read them? Like, darling, they don't expect you to read them. They don't want you to read them. You're
That's
just supposed
right.
to do what you're told. But anyway, so this is up. It's on property insurance. I'm sitting up in the gallery reading. Next thing I know, she votes for it because that's what the whips told her to do. And I'm
Correct.
texting her going, what have you done? You just voted for the windfall property or insurance bill, windfall profits for insurance companies bill. And so that started one of our first fights when we got up here.
Oh boy.
But they don't appear to have a shortage of profits. If I remember right, the largest insurer in the state of Florida, just for their Florida division, gave the president of that division a $24 million bonus for 2023. That
Wow.
doesn't sound to me like a market that's in danger of collapsing.
Far from it. $24 million bonus.
Anybody's welcome to Google it and look it up, and I'm pretty sure that's correct if I remember right. I've read the article months ago, but yeah,
That's phenomenal.
isn't it?
Well, Joel, this has been very insightful, and I really appreciate you joining us. And I hope that it will happen again and again and again because this information uh, our community is not aware of. If they are, not as in detail as what we discussed today. So I really appreciate it. And again, we'd love to have you on the show again.
That's great. I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to coming back. Your listeners are probably sitting there listening right now, either going, wow, that's pretty insightful, or they're either yelling something like, that's the dumbest guy I've ever heard. But at least I probably have them thinking about something.
And that's all we want. We want people to, start thinking about, their local governments,
Right.
their state government, and being more involved. And that means doing their own research and understanding what's happening in their communities. And this right here is a good example of getting informed and educating themselves. We're not trying to persuade them one way or another. It's just
That's
kind of
right.
lay out the landscape for them.
That's
And
right. It's just like, here's my opinion, absorb it for what it's worth. You may throw it out a half a second later because you find it of no value, but it's something. And the government, either intentionally or unintentionally, keeps the majority of people under so much financial stress that they're trying
yes,
to put food on their kids' table and a roof over their head. They don't have time to pay attention to what they're doing. They would
that's
say
correct.
for them, I would say to them.
That's correct. They're so concerned about their kitchen table issues that when do they have time to, do the deep dive, the research and that we do, and try to understand specific issues that affect their kitchen table issues. You're 100% correct. I agree
Right.
with you. I agree with you. And to our community, we hope that you will comment whether you disagree or agree with us. We love to hear what you have to say. We are your political innovators here at Jane Washington. I am David Washington, your host, my co host, Joel Davis. Joel, again, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to have you here with us again soon.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for having me on here.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button. You guys know what to do. Show us some love. Hit the like button. Let's hear what you have to say. We love to engage with you across all of our socials. And don't forget to subscribe to the Informer newsletter. Thank you again. This is UK